For the Chapter 2 ball bounce animation, there are a couple of different ways that you could have done it, including the version that you learned in the textbook. However, my way is close to the textbook but a little bit different, and it might help you to better understand how to create shape tweens for those of you who are struggling. So I'm not going to show you everything that's a part of this particular assignment. The assignment tutorial video that was given to you in the instructions does cover the info layer and how you can lock it and not touch it because it was already created for you. You should know how to create the wall layer and then add the white wall in the stage. So for right now, we're just going to focus on this ball animation. So on frame 1, I just drew a regular ball and it's red color. It's not gradient. It's not fancy in any kind of way. So I'll switch to my selection tool and notice that when I highlight it, it's 60 width by 60 height. And you can click this link so that you can change one property at a time, or if the link is connected, then if you change one property, it'll change the other. That comes in handy when you're starting to squash and manipulate and transform things. So what I want to do in order to create this animation is I actually want to have it go from, let's say, frame 1 to frame 10, and I want it to move until it hits the wall. So what I'll do here is right click on frame 10 and choose insert keyframe. Now you could have chose frame 7, that's going to make a faster animation, or frame 15, that's going to make it a little bit slower. But for me, I like to work in 10s because I like things to kind of be even, and every 5th frame you can see a little bit darker frame here. So it's just easy for me to visually do by 10s. So okay, once we have that, you can see that when we created that keyframe, it copied the first keyframe and put it on the 10th. So even though it looks like the exact same ball, it's actually two of those circles in the exact same position, color, size, etc. Now this second circle, when I click on frame 10, I can move that circle by selecting it and moving it to the wall. And you can see now when I click on frame 9, frames 1 through 9 has the circle in the original position, and then frame 10, it pops over to the wall. So how do we create all those in-between stops so that it looks like it's actually moving from here to here? Well, we don't have to do that. Animate's going to do it for us. So we'll right-click in between and choose Create Shape Tween. Now, because I have a keyframe defined at the beginning and at the end, you can see that the shape tween turned green and the arrow is a solid arrow. If you saw a dashed arrow, it's usually because you set one keyframe, but not the last. All right, so as we move through this or scrub this playhead, we can see all those tweens were created so that we can see that movement from the original starting position to the wall. Now we need to create that squash. And we're going to do it by creating keyframes again, and each copied version of that ball we're going to manipulate and squash. So on frame 11, we'll right click and choose Insert Keyframe. So here we have another copy of the ball. It's the exact same width and height in the exact same position as frame 10. But now with this one, we want it to squash a little bit. So we'll choose the Free Transform tool. And if I go to squash it, you can see that it squashes both on the left and right. That's absolutely okay. You can actually then just move it to the wall. But when that happens, sometimes you accidentally shift it up and down. And you don't want to have that happen because then it looks like it randomly moved for no reason. So instead, we're going to grab this transform point and drag it over to the right hand side. And if it doesn't sit right on this transform handle, that's absolutely okay, as long as this transform point is touching the wall. So now we're going to kind of squash it, not all the way, just about half. And you can see that it squashed properly because that transform point is touching the wall now. So on frame 12, we'll right click and choose Insert Keyframe. And notice it copied that semi-squashed version of the ball. And now I can do the same thing and move that transform point over and squash it even more. So now it's up to us to continue this process by doing Insert Keyframe, move the transform point, semi-squashed, and by this one, frame 14, when we insert the keyframe, we want it to be the exact same as the fully inflated ball, so 60 by 60. So that's why it comes in handy to know the width and height of your object. So we went from frame 1 through frame 10. It's just movement from the starting to the ending position. The next frame we had it semi-squashed, fully squashed, back to semi-squashed, and back to fully inflated. Once it's fully inflated, we need to move it out of the stage. Now, the one thing you should consider is the pacing of your animation. You don't want to have it fly in really fast and then leave really slow, or have it come in really slow and then leave really fast. That's just not natural motion. So in order to make sure that we have kind of good pacing, notice that it's 10 frames from the time it comes in from off the stage till it hits the wall. So we're going to try to keep that going by taking it from frame 14 to frame 24. So there's 10 frames of animation. Now, if it's 1 frame off, it's not going to make a big deal, but you don't want it to be like 10 frames here and 3 frames here, vice versa. So we'll right click and choose Insert Keyframe, and we need to choose where it's going to bounce off to. So I'm going to scroll a little bit down, and let's say I want it to bounce off here. Now it's just a matter of creating that shape tween, because we need to have all those different circles flying through here. Right click, create shape tween. We have the solid arrow in the green fill color, and we scrub it to make sure that that bounce is working. So as we look at this, we have it come in, squash, and then bounce out. Then to create the second version, I'm going to go about 10 frames in because I want there to be a little bit of a pause. Right click and insert keyframe, and I'm going to make sure that this comes over here. Don't cross this stage, because then all of a sudden we're going to see this ball fly up through here. So make sure that the path from there to there, well, and we don't have any animation, so it's just going to pop from there to there. So don't put a shape tween in between here. So that looks pretty good. I want it to come in at this new point. And with this new point, I'm going to do the same thing. So from 35 to 45, I'm going to create a keyframe. And I want the ball to maybe hit right here. And then once that happens, I'm going to create those 4 squash. I'm going to right click, and do create shape tween. Make sure that that's looking pretty good. Notice that these are all pretty even, so the pacing is already going to be good. Then I'm going to create all those shape tweens again. Insert keyframe, move the transform, squash it, right click, insert keyframe, move the transform, squash. And I know this is going to get really boring, but it is what it is, guys. So insert keyframe, move it, reinflate a little bit, right click, insert keyframe, move it, and then we want to go back to full inflation. So again, we're making sure it's 60 by 60. If it's not, you can unlink this and type whichever one, fix whichever one needs to be fixed. And then you might need to use the arrow keys. You just don't want to shift up or down, and you don't want to come off the wall or go into the wall because it's going to look a little bit weird. So last but not least, we just need to bounce it out. So we're going to go 10 frames in, which would be 59. Choose a last place for this to go. It's probably going to take it up there. Right click and do create shape tween. Okay. So now we have that second bounce. We don't have to have any animation here. It's nice to have that little gap before the text actually comes in. So now we need to actually test out how this looks in the Swift file. So we'll go to Control and choose Test, or Command, let's see, Command Return for a Mac or Control Enter for a PC. So I'll hit Test. There it comes in once, twice, and then this was automatically created for me, so I don't have to worry about that. And notice that it bounces in from up here, and then it bounces in again from down here, so it looks a little bit more natural, like it's not the exact same hit both times. So that's how to create the bounce animation. It's not totally done. You need to add some easing property into both the bounce in and the bounce out here and here, and the bounce in, bounce out here and here. I'm not going to tell you whether you use easing in or easing out. You need to make sure to read the chapter, understand what easing is, what it does, how it makes motion look more natural, and then you have to choose, do you do easing in or easing out when the ball is coming in? Do you do easing in or easing out when the ball is bouncing out? That's a thing that you need to know in animation, so I'm not going to tell you here. Make sure you read your textbook.